Hey everyone, Matt here with Reach Your Summit. Thanks for joining me. Since putting a video up earlier this year going over a first look at a new tent that I purchased, I've had a lot of you asking me questions about that tent, how it's holding up, what I like about it, what I dislike about it. So after spending over 60 nights in the tent so far this year, I thought I would put together a quick review going over the Gossamer Gear DCF One tent. In this video, this is just going to be a review. If you want to see how to set up this tent and see an overall closer look at it, I will put a link in the description below so you can check out my first look video of this tent that I put together earlier this year. Very quick overview. This tent is $539 US and it weighs in extremely light, under a pound. That is one thing that really appealed to me when I was looking at tents to purchase this year. I was also considering the Z-Pax Plexamid and the Tarp tent Eon Lee, but I ended up going with the Gossamer Gear DCF One tent. One of the main things that helped with that decision was the packability of this tent. I was looking for something that would pack really small. This tent packs a lot smaller than those two. It's a little less awkward to pack, and it packs a lot smaller than a lot of my other tents that I have, including other DCF tents. The simplicity was another thing that really appealed to me, the small footprint and the material choices for this tent. I've used this tent in varying conditions around the Northeast and Central United States, and this tent has been superb. It's held up really well in those varying conditions. I've been out in heavy downpours up in New Hampshire and the White Mountains with this tent. Also heavy downpours and storms in Vermont in the Green Mountains. I had no issues whatsoever. I stayed very dry. The Dyneema composite fabric worked beautifully, not just at keeping the water out, but by also reducing sag that you normally get with a sil nylon tent. I didn't have to worry about getting out in the storms to adjust the tension on the tent, and that was another thing that led me to getting this tent with the Dyneema composite fabric material. I've also used this tent in around freezing temperatures and areas where condensation conditions were optimal. Ventilation with this tent has also been phenomenal. You're going to get condensation with any single wall tent. So on the trips where I have experienced very little of that, I have used just a quick, simple nano pack towel to clean any dew that I might have on the tent in the morning and then let it dry while I finish packing up my pack. Another thing I really like about it is the livability space, which contributes to the breathability. There is an insane amount of room inside of this one-person tent, which I really like because I'm able to get changed inside of the tent. I'm able to move around and feel very comfortable inside of it. The floor of the tent I also like because it's pretty minimal. So I have a very small footprint. I've had some pretty small spaces where I've set this tent up over the year and I never had any issues. The simplicity of the tent was another thing that I really enjoy. It's very quick to set up. The materials of the tent are holding up really well. I was a little worried and a little cautious about the 7 denier sil nylon floor, but I haven't had any issues with that. I had brought a patch kit just in case I ended up needing to do any repairs for the Dyneema and for the sil nylon, and I have yet to need to use those. I also don't have any issues with the mesh or any holes. I actually find the mesh that they use with this tent to be very durable. I did still take a little bit of precaution with this tent though, and I used a polycryo footprint. I purchased these from Six Moon Designs. This is the small size footprint, and I find it to fit perfectly underneath the Gossamer Gear DCF One tent. This is still the original one that I've been using, so I have over 60 nights with this, and it helped a lot, especially in areas with lots of roots and rocks, like up in New Hampshire in the White Mountains. There were a couple of occasions where I was at designated campsites and a little extra caution was applied along with this footprint to the tent. So I ended up finding some birch bark that was on the ground. I set it over any rocks that might be sticking up out of the dirt or roots. They were pretty weathered, so it ended up being a nice smooth cushioned surface. I put the footprint on top of all of that and then the tent on top of it. No issues whatsoever. One thing I was a little worried about along with the floor of this tent, the choice of the number 3 zippers, but I haven't had any problems with them. I have lubricated them a couple of times so far using a zipper lubricant from Gear. You don't have to go this route. I do find this to work really well, but you can also use your favorite lip balm just to help loosen debris and keep the zipper sliding the way that it should. Using something like this will also help prevent rust and corrosion or any type of organic residue from building up over time. Along with lubricating the zippers, I do clean this tent periodically because this is definitely not a low-cost investment at $539. So I want to get the most value out of this tent that I can. So I'll just fill a bucket with water and I'll clean it with Wax Tech Wash by hand, and then I'll set the tent up in my yard and let it air dry before I put it away. One other thing I do to increase the longevity of this tent is I will store it unpacked when I'm not using it, just so everything isn't being compressed. I did make a modification to this tent, and along with that, another thing that I changed up was this stuff sack. This stuff sack I find to be very difficult to pack the tent in, so I ditched that. And I went with a 4-liter Dyneema composite fabric stuff sack. This has made it really easy to pack and unpack. The other modification that I made to this tent, I added side tie-outs to the walls of the tent on the head end and foot end. This helped increase livable space even more, just by a little bit. It's not completely necessary. At 5'10", I still had plenty of room to move around inside of the tent. I just found it something that I preferred to have on this tent. These side tie-outs not only increase the space inside of the tent for me, but it's also helped me out in very windy conditions. That's one drawback to this tent. You do need to set it up a certain way if you are exposed to wind or you're going to be experiencing very windy conditions. Compared to other tents that I've used, this one does take to the wind a little differently, so having these side tie-outs I found helped out a lot in certain situations. I've had this tent out in between 35-40 mile an hour wind gusts, and it's held up really well in those types of winds. And one other thing that I added to this tent was a clothesline that is provided with the tent when you purchase it. I found the clothesline to come in really handy with hanging my stuff to dry a little bit at night if it's damp from hiking. And I've also been able to use the little clip on there to clip my Garmin InReach Mini and send check-in messages back home while I'm laying inside of my tent comfortably in the stormy weather. Vestibule space is excellent compared to some of my other tents. The vestibule space is very generous. I have plenty of room for my pack and footwear when it's really wet outside. But I also like that I can open up both doors to the vestibule and get a really nice view and great airflow in the tent when it's really nice out. Setting up the Gossamer Gear DCF One tent this year for bike packing or paddling trips, I've been using just a pair of carbon fiber 5-piece poles. These pack really small. They fit in my bike bags. They fit in my paddling dry bags without any problems. And on my backpacking trips, I've been using the Black Diamond Distance carbon poles. These are 120 centimeters, and I find them to work really well with this tent also. A little more stable, a little less bend than I get with the carbon fiber poles that are 5-piece, especially because these are not collapsible at all, but both methods have worked really well. For stakes with the tent, I've been using the ones that are provided by Gossamer Gear to stake out the sill nylon floor, and then I've been using these really rugged, durable Toaks titanium V-style stakes to stake out the rest of the tent. Overall, I love this tent. It is definitely one of my favorite tents that I own at the moment. I look forward to getting a lot more use out of it. A couple of things that I would change with this tent, just as a matter of preference, as I mentioned, I would probably add head and foot tie-outs to this tent. I haven't had any problems with the floor or with the zippers. Those are two things that were concerning to me and I was a little cautious with using this tent, but since I haven't experienced any issues with those, I can't really say that I would change them at the moment. The other thing that I might also consider changing, and is something that I'm looking at modifying down the line, are the corners to the floor of the tent. Having to stake those out requires extra stakes, something that I don't want to have to worry about. I'd like to see some really thin shock cord added to that and attached to the guy line or the corners of the tent. Doing so would allow me to put some tension on it, as I do with my hammock tarp, but allow a little bit of give so I don't have to worry about any fabric or sewn areas or line in general from snapping or tearing. That is something that I'm looking at adding to my tent, just so I don't have to carry those extra 4 stakes for the corners of the tent. But overall, this tent has been fantastic. So have any of you also used the Gossamer Gear, the One tent, whether sill nylon or the Dyneema composite fabric version? Or have you even used the Gossamer Gear, the DCF 2 or the 2 tent? What's your experience been like using this tent out on the trail? I'd love to hear about it. Leave it in a comment below. And if you have any questions on this tent or anything in my other videos, you can also leave that in a comment below, or you can contact me at reachyoursummit.net. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, consider doing so. I'm always adding new content to it, and hit the notification bell so you can be notified when those new videos do come out. I hope you found this video helpful. I greatly appreciate all of you subscribing and watching, and for all of your comments. And until the next one, I'll see you on the trail.